Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Distinguished organizers of the Al-Baraka Islamic Economic Symposium, distinguished guests, and distinguished panelists. It's a great privilege to be the moderator of the fourth session of the symposium titled The Future of the Philanthropy and the Benevolence Sector in Light of Innovation and Development, Opportunities and Challenges. My name is طارق Akin. I am the Head of Finance at Investment and Finance Office of the Presidency of Turkey. In this session, we will address how the future of Islamic social finance to be shaped with innovation and development by discussing opportunities and challenges in the light of some concrete cases. Gladly, it is a really great pleasure for me to be with these distinguished experts in the field. In 1.5 hours, we have 3 presentations, 2 comments, 1 panel, and 1 Q&A parts. So let me start by shortly introducing our distinguished panelists, and then we will proceed, inshallah. Our first presenter is Mr. Dimadijani. Mr. Dijani is the founder and CEO of Hijra Group, Southeast Asia's leading Islamic digital banking and SME financing platform. Previously, Mr. Dijani worked in investment banking space. He is one of the founders of Indonesia Islamic Fintech Association. He obtained his executive MBA from INSEAD, where he led Alami to win the 35th INSEAD Global Venture Competition. Our second presenter is Mr. Rafi Hanif. Mr. Rafi is currently the Group CEO of the MBSB Islamic Banking Group in Malaysia. He previously held various positions at HSBC Group in the UK and UAE and CIMB Group in Malaysia. Mr. Rafi studied law and Islamic law at the International Islamic University Malaysia and then pursued a Master's of Laws at Harvard Law School. Our third presenter is Associate Professor Dr. Ziya Mohammed. Dr. Ziya is also the lead researcher at the Center of Excellence in Social Finance and head of online programs at INSEAD University. He is also the 2024-2025 SCOC's visiting fellow at the Oxford Center for Islamic Studies. A globally recognized Islamic finance scholar, he has advised financial institutions and regulators for almost 25 years across Sharia, Islamic finance regulation, fintech, sustainability, and social finance. Let me also introduce our distinguished commentators. Our first commentator is Dr. Fahad Al-Musa. Dr. Al-Musa is Sharia advisor at Kuwait Finance House. He holds PhD in electronic transactions under Islamic jurisprudence at Islamic University of Medina. And our second commentator is Dr. Khaled Khalifa. Dr. Khaled is a seasoned humanitarian professional with over 30 years of experience in relief and development. Dr. Khaled currently serves as the senior advisor on global Islamic philanthropy initiatives and representative to the Gulf Cooperation Council for the United Nations High Commission for Refugees. Dr. Khaled also played leading roles in the establishment of Refugee Zakat Fund and Global Islamic Funds for Refugees. As I told you in the outset of the session, we will inshallah have 5 parts, and it is quite difficult to manage this kind of extensive session. So without losing time, inshallah, we will start our presentations. Each presenter will have 10 minutes to present their presentation. Let's start with our first speaker, Mr. Dimadijani. His presentation titled Cash Vakf Linked Deposit. It is an innovative Islamic financial instrument that integrates commercial banking with social impact financing. The floor is yours, Mr. Diwan. Sure, sure.
Bismillah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin wassalatu wassalam ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Can you move to the next slide? Okay, I'll just use this. Right. So this morning, I had a privilege after Fajr to walk around the area of the Masjid Nabawi and walk all the way into the Baqi Cemetery. And in Baqi Cemetery, I think this is my second time after more than 10 years to step into the cemetery in Baqi. And it made me wonder that one day I myself going to be there, and what can I expect to be there? And then it had hit me that Waqf is definitely something that a lot of the deceased would want to have. But for a lot of younger generation that live paycheck to paycheck, having an excess of a land or asset to be put on Waqf is not easy, and a lot of people would like to contribute. That's why I think more instruments are needed, which I'm happy to bring forward this idea that we're piloting in Indonesia, the Cash Waqf Link Deposit. But then moreover, there are more young generations that are even not aware of the benefit of this eternal investment instrument. So I think this is what's interesting of Cash Waqf Link Deposit, or what we call it CWLD, that will embed this concept into the everyday banking transactions. A little bit about ourselves. So Hijra Group, we're founded in 2019. It's been almost 7 years of our journey. We've raised more than close to $50 million US, and we have deployed over $600 million US equivalent to 1,000 of SMEs in Indonesia. We are a crowdfunding platform and a digital Islamic banking platform in Indonesia. And our mission is really to improve our customers' lives by providing convenient Islamic financial solution while being inclusive to the underprivileged to create a more equitable society. So innovation like Cash Waqf Link Deposit and the similar instruments is very key to our missions. And this is how we see that technology would be able to touch and expand the reach to younger generation in terms of Islamic financial instruments. Now, only 1.7% of Waqf realized from total opportunity of about $10 billion US in Indonesia based on the Badan Waqf Indonesia or Indonesian Waqf body. And when we talk with some of our customers and samples, some of the blockers is actually on the Cash Waqf side of things is the lack of inclusion into the everyday banking transactions. So while the literacy is pretty low, and I think a lot of emerging markets we have low financial literacy, going into a more complex transaction like Waqf, it's very difficult to comprehend for a lot of young people. So that is one. And second is that we have very, I would say, limited trust to a lot of the NGOs as well in the country because of bad actors, because of non-transparency, etc. So a lot of the young organization only trust a handful of brands, and usually like they're not like having an Islamic instruments to support their business. Now, because of that, we come up with this Waqf initiative, which is initially initiated by our regulator, OJK, and I think Pak Sultan Emir yesterday touched upon a little bit about the structure of the product. So I will be focusing now on the implementation and what we've learned on our 3 pilot projects and what we can do better next time. So our pilot projects focusing on the inclusion to our banking product, which is the term deposit for now, strategic partnership with Select Nazir, and also limited digital marketing. So we want to test before we scale the product whether it's widely received by the young generation or not. So here's our portfolio. There are 3 projects. So these are like some of the stalls of the Mokov Alai that we provided with a little bit of the branding. So for our first project, it's the access to jobs. Apologize for the presentation. I think it should be in the middle of the line. So in the first project, we got around $40,000 equivalent in IDR in deposit placement in just 4 weeks from 5 Waqif. It resulted in about 1,800 equivalent of Waqf proceeds, $1,800. And it translated into 10 mobile food carts for 10 micro-entrepreneurs. And the second project is the water well, access to clean water. So this is in collaboration with the Waqf Nur Taqwa as our Nazir partner. We raised around $60,000 equivalent of deposit placement in 8 weeks from more than 10 Waqif. And this resulted in around $3,000 equivalent of Waqf proceeds that we put into building well for 92 households in Banten area west of Jakarta. And last one, this is still ongoing. It's access to food security. The target is to raise around $48,000 equivalent of deposits. And this is to plant Cavendish banana for the madrasa students. For one of the pesantren partner that we have. Among all of these 3 projects, we got some learnings. Let me just open this. So first, there's a big potential for this kind of product, but we're still scratching the surface. At the same time, the literacy and familiarity are still big blockers for a lot of the young generations in our target market. And the third, what we also realize among the Gen Z especially, there's a new trend of experience-based volunteering. So for those who grow up digital native and everything is very accessible from the phone, they would like to experience the real world. So there's been growing of volunteer, like actually going visit the disaster area or the orphanage, etc. So this is an interesting learning for us. So way forward, we're trying to, moving forward, we're trying to embed into all of our deposit product, the Waqf component. So when we talk with some of the guys, the cash Waqf link deposit, I think it's pretty challenging because the depositors will not get any returns out of the deposits because all of the returns will be translated to the Waqf. So what we're trying to think is to split of the elements of returns and the Waqf as well. I think that's under discussion. So rather than having a separate product that the depositors can choose, we're just embed into all of the deposits, Mudarabah deposit products that's still under discussion. That's kind of like our learning. So this is also parallel with the education. So working together with reputable digital native NGOs and Nazir, we have one partner that we're trying to enter a partnership with called Kita Bisa. It's the Indonesian version of LaunchGood. They now have the Waqf service as well. So having a more effective digital marketing through different ecosystem would help on the adoption. And on the reporting side is to work together with them to create an API reporting. So when our users access our mobile banking app, they will see the impact immediately. which inshallah will create more trust, because the experience is seamless in their mobile phone. And last but not least is working together with the event organizer for the Volun trip, together with the key opinion leaders, and go visit and trying to kind of scale the marketing from there. So jazakumullah khairan. Thank you very much for your time. Wassalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, brother Dima. Now let's move to our second presenter, second speaker, Mr. Rafi Hanif. His paper titled Challenges Facing the Third Sector at the Local and International Levels. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, assalatu wassalam ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you to Al-Baraka for bringing us all together to deliberate and discuss on these important and impactful issues. I had the pleasure of working on a few non-profit initiatives. Back in Malaysia, I was running a foundation for a large banking group for many years. And the challenges we faced particularly revolves around this concept of ihsan. So we talked, yesterday there were very few speakers spoke on the concept of birra wal-ihsan. So charities come through piety, and the act of charity should be given with ihsan, meaning the left hand should not know what the right hand is giving in charity. So ihsan has two dimensions. One is sincerity, the other is excellence. How do we build excellence in the charitable act that we engage in? For example, if you give fish to a poor man, it's a good deed. But if you give him a fishing rod and teach him to fish himself, it's a better deed. But if you can actually buy him a fishing boat with a net and a freezer, he can store the excess fish that he could not sell in the market, that is ahsant. Because you are creating savings for him that he will then move from mustahiq to muzakki. We want the act of charity to move people from recipients to donors. That should be the concept of ihsan that we should all aspire to. So if you look at the macro level, so ihsan should be looked at it from a macro as well as micro level. At a macro level, most advanced economies, most developed countries today disclose the contribution of non-profit sector, which they call the third sector. There are two sectors predominant in the economy, the private sector and the government sector or public sector, and in between there is the third sector, the non-profit sector. And this non-profit sector in the advanced economies is contributing about 4 to 5% of the GDP. So these advanced economies have created what they call non-profit satellite accounts. These accounts orbit around the GDP accounting system that every country has today. So Saudi Arabia's GDP today, last year, 2025, was around $1.2 trillion. It's amazing increase over the last 3 years. If you look at 5% of GDP, that's about $60 to $70 billion should be the contribution of the non-profit sector. This is about 200 billion, roughly, 200 to 220 billion should be the contribution tracked at the macro level by the statutory department in Saudi, GSTAT, to disclose what is the year-on-year growth of the non-profit sector's contribution. Today, King Fahd Foundation has disclosed back in last year, the total contribution of non-profit sector in Saudi Arabia is about 100 billion riyal, which is about half of the intended target. So Vision 2030 for Saudi Arabia wants to achieve a 5% contribution to GDP by the non-profit sector, which is amazing. Saudi Arabia has already reached more than half. It's around 100 billion today. 48 billion is contributed through awqaf. 47 billion comes from the zakat, sadaqat, and other non-profit initiatives. This is a fantastic achievement by Saudi Arabia. So besides Saudi Arabia, Mozambique and Kyrgyzstan also tracks the contribution of the non-profit sector to GDP. So I think most OIC countries today, they do a lot of charitable work, but it's not being tracked. The importance of tracking at a GDP level is you need to know your potential. If it's 5% is your potential, Saudi Arabia is about 2.5%. So you know in the next 2-3 years, how do you coordinate all the efforts to achieve 5% contribution to GDP? Next, you also slice the actual impact of this contribution across social dimension, education, environment, as well as economic empowerment. So then you can see, is it too much going into social? Or is it going towards environment? If it's lacking, then you put the levers to ensure that each of the 4 sectors get the right attention and contribution. So Malaysia's zakat contribution has been increasing, but this is the formal sector. Malaysia is about $1 billion plus, close to 1.2 billion in terms of formal zakat collection, but the potential is huge. And it is run by the state in a very formal manner. Each of the states have got the zakat bodies where they collect from both the individuals as well as the corporates. In Malaysia, zakat is not mandatory. It's purely voluntary. And for individuals who contribute, we do get tax deduction. So if your tax is 100 and you pay zakat of 25, then your 25 zakat contribution is netted off, so you only pay 75 tax. And in Malaysia, we are also tracking the zakat's impact based on the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly SDGs like SDG 1 to reduce poverty, SDG 3 in terms of health, SDG 4 for education, and so on. So it's also important to make sure that we want to make sure that the impact is diverse. To create ihsan in terms of the charitable act, we need to have a framework. It's not just giving. Of course, there will be some urgent needs. There could be an earthquake. There could be floods in Malaysia, for example. We do channel more towards those causes. But generally, when you start the zakat year, like any business we do, we need to have a plan. And that plan is based on certain percentage. We want to target 5% of GDP contribution coming from zakat sector. And then you break down into various subsectors. From the 5, let's say Saudi Arabia collects 200 billion. At the beginning of the year, Saudi needs to clearly identify, out of the 200 billion that we collect potentially this year, how much should go into economic empowerment to help the poor to move away from the poverty line? How much we should dedicate for healthcare? How much should we dedicate for education, environment, and so on? And then you run quarterly to track whether these contributions are being channeled to the right sectors and measuring the right impact. Now, this is the most important slide I want to leave it with you. When a proposal comes, look, give us 100,000 riyal to help some farmers. I'm giving you an example. There was a farming effort in Malaysia. It's a chili farming. You know, we love to eat chilies for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So we don't have enough chili farms in Malaysia. We import, maybe 70% of our chilies we import. So we want to create a chili farm in a location, in a rural location. So we looked at 4 quadrants: input, output, outcome, and impact. Most charitable organization only looks at 2, input and output. To some extent, they look at outcome, but rarely impact. Input means you need to provide, they have land. These rural households, they have land. So we provide the technology, how to grow chili. So we provide the fertigation system. It's a system that uses app to track water and fertilizer. We give them seed, we give them the fertilizers, and we also give them the technology. And we have a distributor who will buy the chili from them. Next is we look at the output. How many people, how many households benefited from it? So let's assume 100 households benefited, each of them getting 2 acres of chili farm. That's the output. How many number of hours we did for training? So the input is the material, the training we give, and financial assistance we give. Output is how many people are actually benefiting from it. Then we look at the outcome. Outcome is when they started, what was their monthly income? After they started, chili requires 3 months before you can harvest, and then you can see the financial benefits. Then we look at the outcome. So if they were earning $1,000 on average before the intervention, if you then look at the input is $2,500, that means the income has grown from $1,000 to $2,500. It's a good outcome. But we don't stop at outcome. We then look at the impact. With the increase in income, have they improved their quality of life? So we have, for example, Dato' Irwan mentioned about iTekad yesterday. iTekad is a program that banks run, Islamic banks run in Malaysia. We do programs like this. And after 1 or 2 years, we send the same people to go and do research in the households to see, after we intervene, has the quality of life improved? Are the students getting better results? Because now they have better income. They get better food at home. Are they performing better in schools? So the impact is not only just financial, but the social impact. Is the community having a better environment? Are they living a better life? So the impact is what we need to look at. And I think impact measurement is what leads a charity towards ihsan. And from that intervention, you will know, a classic example is in sub-Saharan Africa. There was an intervention where the schools had very low turnout and very high dropouts. Students were not coming to schools regularly, and the dropouts were high. So they tried to intervene by bringing better quality textbooks. Then they said, let's bring quality teachers. Then they changed the pedagogy. They improved the teaching methods. And there were marginal increase. When they improved the food, they gave free food, they realized the attendance went up, the quality of the students' performance went up, and the quality of the exam results also improved. So by intervening and doing this impact assessment, which we call IOOI, input, output, outcome, and impact, you can see whether intervention A, B, C, D is giving you the right results. In the case of Africa, we realized the free meal was more impactful than the other 3. But if you have not done this impact analysis, you wouldn't know. You might think that giving better textbooks or having better quality teachers or having a better pedagogical method will help, but effectively is the food that was the biggest impactful. Thank you. I would like to leave this impact analysis with you and hope everyone can benefit from this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rafi. Now let's move to our third presenter, Associated Professor Ziad Mohammed. His paper, or more correctly, his presentation titled Crowdfunding and Mobilizing Capital for Charitable Work. The floor is yours, brother.
جزاكم الله خير. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. ما بعد، اللهم افتح علينا بحكمتك وانشر علينا برحمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. يقول الله تعالى: وتعاونوا على البر والتقوى. Respected scholars, attendees, participants to the 46th Al-Baraka Symposium, welcome to this session. We're going to be talking about crowdfunding and perhaps the mobilizing of capital for philanthropic activities and how it will move the industry forward, inshallah. Now, as we begin, I want you to remember 3 numbers. And throughout the presentation, let's see if you can pick up these 3 numbers. The first number is 40,000. 40,000. The second number is 1.479 billion. The second number, 1.479 billion. And the third, 15 seconds. 15 seconds. So let's talk about exactly how crowdfunding begins, how it started, and then jump to some of the mobilizing methodologies that are used, specifically in South Africa and with global benchmarks. In 1884, the Statue of Liberty. I'm sure everyone's heard of the Statue of Liberty. Well, it was a gift from France, but it was lying in crates in France. Unfortunately, the United States could not raise the funds from government to build the foundation. So the Statue of Liberty was sitting in crates. And it was quite embarrassing for the state of New York that wanted to host the statue. So Joseph Pulitzer, that famous Pulitzer Prize, it was named after Joseph Pulitzer. He runs a campaign through his publication, and he says, if anyone contributes to the pedestal, the foundation of the Statue of Liberty, then I will include their name in the newspaper. 120,000 people donated. But they donated small amounts, less than $1, around 50 cents, in fact. Children donated simply because they wanted their names in the publication. Overall, in 5 months, they raised about $100,000. In today's terms, that's roughly $3 million US. The pedestal gets built. But more importantly, ordinary people discover something profound. When small acts of giving are mobilized together, they can actually build monuments that last forever. Now, traditionally, when we look at crowdfunding and its application, then we know that we have a source consistently in Islamic history. Whenever we look at the Islamic history, we will find some lessons to learn from. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu is facing a catastrophe, a devastating drought. Amr Ramada, 18 after Hijri. Unfortunately, the challenge of maintaining the people in Medina is huge. He sends a letter out to governors and cities, and suddenly 1,000 caravans come in from the surrounding governorates. And 40,000 residents are fed every day. That's another number. This is Islamic crowdfunding at state scale, coordinating collective mobilization with governance, personal sacrifice, and zero tolerance for preventable death. And now when we move to the modern version, then we're talking about real-time updates, and we're ensuring that there's actually a framework that ensures compliance, auditability at all stages. We've experienced 3 broad waves of crowdfunding. First, the disintermediation exercise, and this is where we could bypass the banks and reach the needy directly. So today, a donor in Jeddah can support someone in Jakarta or Aceh simply through a smart app. And this allows the quick process of funds to those that are truly in need. So geographic barriers are now removed. In the second wave, we've got mobile integration. They lowered the barrier to participation. This is now bringing in speed further, and it also brings in a huge danger, the popularity contest. In 2014, a man named Zach Brown, he jokingly asked for $10 to make a potato salad on Kickstarter. He goes viral. How much money does he raise? $55,000. $55,000 for a potato salad. So this is the risk. If we prioritize what's viral and viral influences over those in need, then we may fail the test of ihsan. The third wave, this is where they change the speed of trust formation. So traditional charity now is worked through a slower intermediation. Donors start giving to institutions, and then they disappear. The platform itself begins to change the contract, and now donors expect traceability, impact updates, and real-time verification. That means we need to report back to our donors consistently in order to build that trust. Otherwise, we will be scaling without transparency and without trust, and this will undermine Sharia compliance and visibility without equity, and it will create a new form of exclusion. The Islamic imperative, and as we look at the opportunities, we realize that for charitable organizations, the revenue streams must be diversified. They cannot be relying on the same donors all the time. And you've heard this before from the earlier speakers. Donor fatigue is a real issue. And asking the same large donors, in effect, to provide the same amounts or larger amounts every time there is disaster or there is need puts too much pressure on the donors, and eventually there is this annoyance and frustration, and you can't continue. But small amounts, and what was mentioned by Brother Dima earlier, Kitabisa, is bringing in money of 10 rupees every morning from students. So in this way, there is a mobilization of mindset and behavior towards doing good. So now you see the Birr and Ihsan actually integrating within behavior. And that's exactly what we want to see. We want to see a jama'ah logic. We want to see a collective approach to doing good. And crowdfunding allows us to do that. Now, we're moving in from donation crowdfunding to productive crowdfunding. And this means that we must understand one important structure here. What's depicted is the graduation model. The graduation model simply states that when we are trying to support someone, it is not about giving them a microloan. We must understand the context. And first, they may very well need zakat. So there is the consumptive expenditure that's required. And then we can move on to microloans, and then equity crowdfunding, and then perhaps, of course, hybrid crowdfunding. But it has to be step by step. And the crowdfunding experiences we have today tend to target specific projects and communities. And that is fine, as long as we understand it's an end-to-end solution. Capital without capability produces predictable failure and will just replicate failure. And there are many examples of that, and perhaps during the panel discussion, we can raise some of those examples. Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia has really been at the forefront of a state-facilitated crowdfunding structure. In Saudi Arabia, you have 3 key platforms, and I'm going to talk briefly about them. They offer us a concentrated case where digital philanthropy is now created through an architecture. It's an infrastructure. It's not an ad hoc scenario. And with the state approach, you now have a scenario where the user interface allows you to donate in 15 seconds. So Jude Housing, for example, achieved a world record in Ramadan 2025, and it raised 1.479 billion. That's the other figure, 1.479 billion. And it did it in 1 month. That is a Guinness World Record. And this is all through crowdfunding. The 15-second results in 54% increase in donations and an increase of 84% of families supported through crowdfunding. The examples of Ihsan, which is a crowdfunding platform, a national aggregator that mobilized over 9 billion riyals and supporting almost 5 million beneficiaries across healthcare, education, and relief. And then Jude Housing that provides affordable housing, as we mentioned, and Manafa, which is your capital market or capital layer. It finances SMEs, and over 1.5 billion riyals have been deployed across 180 Saudi SMEs already. There's some learning that we can take from the global environment. We've got the regulatory sandbox in the UK, the tiered exposure to investor caps in Malaysia, and then in Kenya, the very famous M-Pesa integration. So there is learning there. So if we want to mobilize, then we've got to see how we can integrate them more effectively. So there's a pathway here. We've come to a crossroads. We need to take a decision. And this decision is now, are we going towards attention-focused crowdfunding? Remember the potato salad example? Or are we going towards a governance approach? And with a governance approach, we have a strong foundation that we can build upon, and now we tick all the Sharia compliance boxes. So in other words, we prioritize verification, prioritize auditability, and finally trust infrastructure. So the urgent mandate over the next 5 years, regulators need to play a role for audit, remove algorithmic bias because we have AIs involved in crowdfunding now. The platforms must be capable and accept responsibility, and the sector itself must demand accountability. So there are several strategic takeaways as we close. The fundamental paradigm shift is crowdfunding is actually democratizing access to capital. It's enabling a broader participation in social funding. And this means that the policymakers must develop adaptive frameworks to protect the privacy of data. It must protect the flow of funds from the donor all the way to the beneficiary, and ultimately allow for scalability in crowdfunding. So these are actionable steps, and I'll end off with this. For ecosystem actors, there is a lot to do. And what should be done? Well, first of all, we need to make sure that the platform operators are training campaigners effectively, and this will build trust over time. The NGOs, they have to integrate crowdfunding, and it can't be a nice to have. It must be a core funding pillar. Drive loyalty through direct donor engagement, and you need to have impact stories, as you've heard from Brother Dima. Impact stories create a strong public perception that you're actually doing good. For researchers and academics, we need to analyze the long-term impacts, donor demographics, and the effectiveness of the platforms over time. Without that, we don't know what's working and what's not. Respected participants, Bir and Ihsan, they're not just about giving money, but building systems that make Bir sustainable and Ihsan equitable. And we know that technology is not an end in itself. It's a means to achieve Sharia objectives to serve humanity with dignity. Let us build the digital Bayt al-Mal with strict governance, clear objectives, and sincere hearts. As Allah Azza wa Jal states in the Quran, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وما تقدموا لأنفسكم من خير تجدوه عند الله. And a brief couplet perhaps to round off the presentation. إذا اجتمعت أيدي للعطاء فإن القليل يغدو كثيرا وبالبر والإحسان نرقى فنبني إلى السماء جسورا. والله ولي التوفيق والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Thank you, Dr. Ziad. So we have finished our presentations, and let me move to our commentators. We have two distinguished commentators. Let me start with Dr. Fahad Al-Musa for his thoughts, reviews, and comments on the presentations. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Brother طارق, for your kind introduction and your managing so effective as well. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم على النبي الكريم. أما بعد، بادئ ذي بدء أشكر المملكة العربية السعودية على الاستضافة الكريمة، وكذلك الرعاية الكريمة من صاحب السمو الملكي سلمان بن سلطان أمير المدينة المنورة، وحسن التنظيم من العاملين في ندوة البركة. في الحقيقة أنا أمام تحدي كبير، كوني أعلق على 3 بحوث في غاية الجودة، بحثين يعني يتعلقون بحالات عملية، إحداهما منتج معمول به في بنك الهجرة الأندونيسي، والآخر حالات عملية مدروسة في ماليزيا وكذلك المملكة العربية السعودية، والبحث الثالث للدكتور زياد بحث أكاديمي. فأسأل الله سبحانه وتعالى أن يبارك في هذه الدقائق، واستلهم اسم هذه الندوة المباركة البركة في هذه الدقائق اليسيرة. بشكل عام البحوث تناولت جزئيات مهمة، وهي توظيف الزكاة في دعم الاقتصاد، وكذلك تمويل الطبقات المجتمع الوسطى وكذلك الفقيرة. والكل يعلم أن أهمية الطبقة الوسطى في كل المجتمعات في دعمها، ودور الزكاة وكذلك الصدقات والإحسان في هذا الجانب. كذلك البحوث تناولت بشكل عام أهمية الموازنة بين مصلحة من وجبت عليه الزكاة ومن استحق الزكاة. الشريعة الإسلامية وازنت بين هذين الأمرين. جاء في الموطأ فيما روي عن عمر رضي الله تعالى عنه أنه قال: اتجروا بأموال اليتامى لا تأكل الزكاة. بمنطوق هذا الأثر يدل على وجوب الاتجار بأموال اليتامى، أي الحفاظ على التجار سواء كانوا يتامى وكذلك غيرهم، مقصد عام والحفاظ على المال. كذلك بمفهومه وجوب الزكاة. وأما المعنى العام، أعني المقصد الجزئي من هذا الحديث، هو الموازنة بين مصالح التاجر وكذلك مصالح الفقير. كذلك من الأمور التي تطرق لها في هذه البحوث الهامة هي إبراز جانب الاقتصاد الحقيقي، أن الاقتصاد الإسلامي أو التمويل الإسلامي اقتصاد مبني على اقتصاد حقيقي فاعل يستفيد منه جميع طبقات المجتمع، وكذلك دوران المال على جميع طبقات المجتمع. أختم بجزئية رابعة في قضية المقدمة، أن الزكاة كما هي مصدر لإنعاش الفقراء ومصدر لدخلهم، كذلك هي مصدر لتحفيز التاجر لإخراجها. فالأمران يصبان في موضع واحد، وهي المحافظة على الكيان المالي في الدول. وما هو النتيجة وما هي النتيجة عندما يتم الحفاظ على هذين الجانبين، أعني المحافظة على حقوق التاجر وعلى حق الفقير؟ النتيجة أننا سيكون عندنا اقتصاد متين، بالإضافة إلى انعدام الطبقة الأخيرة، أعني الفقراء. هل هذه المسألة فرضية أم حقيقية؟ لا يخفى على شريف علمكم أن المسألة ليست فرضية إذا تم تحقيقها على طريقة صحيحة. فإننا نعلم ماذا حصل في عهد عمر بن عبد العزيز، أن المسلمين لم يجدوا مكانا للزكاة حتى يعطوها، ولم توجد ثمة هناك طبقة الفقراء. حتى لا أطيل عليكم، هناك تعقيبات إن شاء الله تكون إضافة بعد إضافة. أبتدئ فيما الحالة العملية أو المنتج في بنك الهجرة الأندونيسي. في الحقيقة أن التعقيبات إن شاء الله ستكون مرتبطة بالوقف النقدي تحديداً. وفيما يتعلق في الوقف النقدي، أن مجمع الفقه الإسلامي في الندوة أو في الندوة رقم 15 أجازت هذا الجانب من الأوقاف. أولاً التحول نحو الاندماج المالي اليومي، أي وصول هذه الأموال والتدفقات النقدية إلى الحياة اليومية عند الناس المحدودي الدخل. يتميز هذه التجربة أو هذا المنتج في جعل الوقف النقدي جزءاً عضوياً من المنتجات المصرفية اليومية، بدأ من اعتبارها نشاطاً خيرياً منفصلاً من خلال ربط الوديعة لأجل تيرم ديبوزيت بالوقف. يتم تجاوز فجوة التعبئة أي موبايزيشن جاب التي حددتها الورقة بوضوح، مما يحول الوقف من فرصة نظرية إلى أداة مالية متاحة ومستدامة في سياق الاقتصاد الرقمي. كذلك مواجهة عقبة الثقة بالشراكة والشفافية. أصاب الباحث بارك الله فيه في تحديد جزئين رئيسيين، وهو غياب الاندماج المصرفي وضعف تقارير التفاعلية الموثوقة. والحل المقدم ليس أمرا فرضيا، بل يعتمد على أمور منها شراكة استراتيجية مع نظار رقميين موثوقين. كذلك كما ذكره في بحثه جهود تسويق رقمية محدودة ليست مبنية على أمر مركزي. كذلك تطرق الباحث إلى الانتقال من الكم إلى الأثر، أحد أقوى الإسهامات التي ذكر تغيير معيار النجاح من كم تم جمع الودائع إلى ماذا تغير في حياة الناس مع مؤشرات واضحة. سادساً، النموذج الأندونيسي كمثال قابل للتكيف. لم يقدم العرض أو الباحث بارك الله فيه التجربة الأندونيسية كنموذج مقيس، بل كنموذج رائد يعتمد عليه من حيث الاندماج المصرفي، وكذلك التركيز على الوصول الرقمي لأكثر من مليون واقف محتمل. كذلك اقتراحات هذه يسيرة أقدمها للباحث. رغم التميز الذي طرحه الباحث أو كذلك المنتج، إلا أنه يحتاج بعض التعزيزات، منها تفصيل أكبر حول آلية الامتثال لمعايير الإفصاح الدولية مثل الأيوفي، كذلك الالتزام بمعايير مجلس خدمات التمويل الإسلامي IFSB، بالإضافة إلى توسيع النقاش حول دور الذكاء الاصطناعي في تحسين التقارير التفاعلية وكذلك الوصول. أما فيما يتعلق في البحث المتعلق في القطاع الثالث، فإن الورقة لا شك تحسب لها جرأتها في نقل القطاع الثالث من الوصف الأخلاقي إلى التحليل الاقتصادي المؤسسي، وتقديمه بوصفه فاعلا نموذجا قابلا للقياس. الأمر الثاني حول إشكالية الثقة والتقنية. أصاب الباحث في تشخيص فجوة الثقة بوصفها العائق الأخطر أمام نمو القطاع الثالث، لا نقص الموارد. واللافت أن الحل لم يطرح وعظيا بل حوكميا وكذلك تقنيا من حيث الشفافية اللحظية وقياس الأثر والبنية الرقمية. ثالثا، الزكاة من عبادة فردية إلى مؤسسة تنموية. من أقوى المحاور التي تعرض لها الباحث أن الزكاة ليست مجرد التزام شرعي، بل أداة مالية سيادية ذات أثر كلي مايكرو إمباكت. وربط الزكاة بأهداف التنمية المستدامة يفتح الباب لإعادة إدماجها السياسات المالية والتخطيط التنموي بالإضافة للشراكات الدولية. كذلك تطرق أو من الأمور العناصر التي تطرق لها الباحث أهمية التحول في قياس النجاح. هذه النظرية وهي التحول في طريقة قياس النجاح التي تطرق لها الباحث من أهم الإسهامات العلمية. الانتقال من السؤال كيف أنفقنا إلى السؤال ماذا تغير، وذلك عبر مؤشرات مثل استقرار الدخل وكذلك التخرج من الاستحقاق والقدرة على الصمود. النموذج الماليزي كدليل لا كنموذج مستنسخ. الورقة لم تقع فقط في قصر التجربة أو حكر التجربة وإبراز التجربة الماليزية، بل قدمتها كنموذج قابل للتكييف لا النسخ، وأبرزت كذلك عناصر النجاح، منها الاعتراف المؤسسي والحوافز الضريبية. والنقطة اللي فعلا لفتت انتباهي كثيرا هي اللامركزية المنضبطة في الزكاة. إن شاء الله يمدينا بإذن الله. التعقيب النقدي البناء كذلك. ننتقل إلى ورقة الدكتور زياد بارك الله فيه. أولا الدكتور زياد جزاه الله خير برز الجانب التحول المنهجي نحو الابتكار الرقمي المقاصدي، يعني هذا فعلا إضافة كبيرة تحسب للدكتور بارك الله فيه في نقل التمويل الجماعي من أداة تسويقية عرضية إلى امتداد رقمي للزكاة والصدقات والوقف النقدي، معتمدا منهجية التثليث، الأدبيات المحكمة زائد التقارير السوقية زائد الوثائق التنظيمية. وهذا النهج يعكس رؤية استراتيجية تؤدي المقاصد الشرعية مع التقنيات الحديثة وكذلك الشبكات الاجتماعية والهواتف الذكية كما عرضه الباحث بارك الله فيه. ويبرز كذلك اقتراح بيت المال الرقمي، وهو يعني إبداع وابتكار يحسب للباحث جزاهم الله خير. وذلك بحلول 2035 كنموذج حوكمة مستقبلي بعد تنظيم التعبئة والتخصيص والشفافية. شكرا. Thank you.
Thank you, brother, for your contributions. Now, let me turn to Dr. Khalifa. The floor is yours.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. يسعدني ويشرفني أن أكون مع حضراتكم اليوم وأشكر ندوة البركة ورعاة هذا المنتدى الكريم، وأشرف بوجودي في هذه القاعة مع خيرة عقول التمويل الإسلامي والعمل الخيري الإسلامي وأساتذتنا في هذا المجال. واسمحوا لي أن أكمل كلمتي باللغة العربية بما أن المقدمين يتحدثون اللغة الإنجليزية حتى أتحدث إليهم مباشرة. الدكتور فهد جزاه الله خير غطى معظم الجوانب الفنية, the technical parts that relate to the papers themselves. And he started with a very good point that it's very difficult to compare the three papers because they are completely different in nature. One of them is prepared as research that is kind of publishable in a peer-reviewed journal. That's Dr. Ziad's paper, an excellent piece that I personally learned a lot from. And the other two papers are based on case studies that were implemented in the field. So I will not delve deep into the technicalities because I think first Dr. Fahd has covered most of that, and second I have some issues related to the conceptual framework of the papers that I would like to invite the researchers and the audience to think about alike. If we speak about the first paper or the first presentation about waqf and cash waqf, the paper presented by Brother Dima and the Hijra Bank, congratulations. I think this is really a very innovative approach, and I think it mixes actually different tools in Islamic philanthropy. If we look at temporary waqf and cash waqf, and Dr. Fahd has referred to the fact that this has been approved from a Sharia perspective. We have our own experience in UNHCR, where we got fatwa from the Islamic Development Bank, the Sharia Committee of the Islamic Development Bank, to establish the Global Islamic Fund for Refugees, which is a cash waqf, and it is a temporary waqf. So it is very, very similar to the case that Hijra Bank has implemented. I think when it comes to the temporality of the intervention, one of the main benefits of that is to cross the trust gap. I think it helps you raise money easier when you tell the donor, I'm actually getting the money for a small period of time. It's not perpetual. I will have it for 10 years and I will give it back to you. So they still feel that they are still in control. They're doing a waqf, but it's a temporary waqf. And they can look at it as a qard hasan as well. I do not see a very big difference between the concept of a temporary waqf and a qard hasan. You're giving an organization an amount of money to utilize for a certain period of time. They give it back to the donor after that. You can look at it also as a sadaqah jariyah, because most of that is invested in sustainable interventions. So I salute the mix of tools and the innovation. I think if you add on top of that blockchain and the use of blockchain in improving accountability, overcoming the trust gap, I think that will be a very useful addition. Then the second paper the paper from Malaysia, and the graduation or the move from the concept of charity to the concept of إحسان. الفارق بين العمل الخيري والصدقة التي ليس لها مردود تنموي مثلا، إذا كان ممكن ترجمة ذلك باللغة العربية. I think we are very late in doing that. The West has tried to do this for a very long time. We are very late in this process. And it is still better late than never. I have one main issue with the paper that is related to the SDGs. And probably I'm the last one in this room who should say that. I don't think we should link zakat with the SDGs. That's my personal view. The SDGs are not going to be achieved by 2030. We are seeing actually some countries that are going back, not improving. What kind of SDGs are we talking about in a place like Gaza? What kind of SDGs are we talking about in Yemen, in Sudan? The Muslim world and the SDGs, when you put them in one sentence, they do not really fit very well. I think we are moving backwards in many areas, especially in the Middle East. Second, I think zakat does not need to be verified or proved by something like the SDGs. Zakat is more than 14 centuries ago, tried and tested. We do not need to verify our zakat success or the success of zakat based on contributions to the SDGs. And my third concern in that, who is responsible for the achievement of the SDGs? Is it civil society or government in the first place? And this is a comment about both papers, the first two papers, is that we shouldn't really let governments off the hook. Yes, the third sector is very important, if we can call it as such. Civil society is very important, but who is responsible for development? Who's the primary entity responsible for development? It is governments. It's not NGOs. It's not philanthropic enterprises. They do that to complement what governments need to do. And especially in high-income and middle-income countries. If you are talking about a high-income country, there is no excuse that the government is not playing its role in achieving the SDGs or developing its people or providing social services. So we need to make sure that the advancement in civil society does not come at the accountability, at the price of the accountability of governments, if I am making any sense in that context. Then my last comment about Dr. Ziad's paper. The paper is really very detailed, Dr. Ziad, and I benefited a lot from it. I just have a couple of points for reflection. One is the role of crowdfunding in achieving independence. I haven't read that in the paper. I think one of the main benefits of crowdfunding is helping organizations to be independent of governments and independent of institutions that pay them. And we are seeing now, as we speak, a lot of politicization of humanitarian work, development work. Governments and donors decide who gets assisted and who doesn't, which countries receive assistance and which countries do not. And the Islamic world is paying the price for us not taking this responsibility much earlier. We depended a lot on Western donors to implement projects in the humanitarian sector. I think crowdfunding gives organizations the independence. to decide, yes, I want to work in Gaza, I want to work in Somalia, I want to work in Sudan. Which brings me to another important point, that the three papers are focusing at the domestic level. And we need to move a bit from what is domestic to what is ummah related. What is the Islamic ummah, in a way. In our fatwas, when it relates to zakat compliance, if we do not do that, we will leave communities like the Rohingya completely unassisted, because nobody will think of them. And they live in a very poor country, one of the poorest countries in the world, one of the least developed countries. So if we focus only on our rich countries and where we are doing well in our countries, we will leave a large segment of Muslim communities unassisted. So my point, and I will come to a conclusion now, is the independence. Dr. Ziad, I think if we add that to the paper, it will be more excellent than it is. It is already an excellent piece. And my second point is the role of legal frameworks. The paper focuses on the positive side of legislation, that legal frameworks can help organizations crowdfund. But actually, there is a negative side as well. We are seeing regulations stopping crowdfunding, regulations that do not allow organizations to raise money, especially after 9/11 and all the terrorism financing regulations and all of that. We are seeing a lot of very restrictive laws and regulations that go against the direction of crowdfunding, and I think revision of those policies can help improve the objective of crowdfunding. Finally, most Western successful organizations in crowdfunding are now talking about fundraising psychology and the use of both blockchain on one side, fundraising psychology, and fintech. And if we combine those together, fundraising from the crowds, from the groups, become much more effective. جزاكم الله كل خير.
Thank you very much for your important comments. I thank to all of our presenters and commentators. Roughly, we have around 15 minutes. And inshallah, I want to open a panel discussion for the first 10 minutes of our remaining time, and the rest will be, inshallah, devoted for the Q&A. Let me start by sharing 3 of my takeaways quickly, just to initiate, just to spark the discussion. Then, inshallah, I will kindly ask you for your thoughts, for your comments, especially I will direct my questions to the presenters because they have already received their comments from the commentators. So it is time for you to share your reflections. My first takeaway is as follows. By the way, just to give you small information, my department, finance department, is focusing on 5 main areas of financial, infrastructure and finance: Islamic finance, fintech, private markets, Istanbul Financial Center, and sustainability. Alhamdulillah, these presentations and comments cover most of what we are working on. As I told you, fintech is one of our areas, and we are officially the head of fintech in the country. And the president of the office asked me to start preparing the fintech strategy document, the country's first strategy document on fintech. Then I asked him, okay, we will write the document, but there is something in my mind that I couldn't find an answer for. Fintech is by definition a kind of combination of finance and technology. So should we include everything standing on the intersection of finance and technology in our strategy document? If so, we don't need to write a separate strategy document. All of this, financial sector can write their own strategy documents and just put fintech as a chapter or section in it. So fintech as the subject of a strategy document, as a subject of a national strategy, should have some features. So I think the most important feature of fintech is its relevance to, how to say, giving rise to a paradigm change in the current practices. Why I am saying this? Because as far as I see from your presentations, from my own past experience, fintech is the future tool of Islamic social finance. It will have a very core, very important place within social finance, philanthropy, benevolence, and so on. However, I think there is an important point here. We should not primarily focus on technology. This might come to a very bold saying to you. I don't say that we should forget, technology. It is almost all about technology. But in Islamic finance, as you all highlighted, trust is very important. For social finance, trust comes first. So the fintech shepherd in Islamic social finance should focus on how to guarantee, how to secure trust by focusing on the mechanism. Plus, another thing relevant to trust, Sharia compliance, ensuring Sharia compliance. So the Islamic finance world should focus on how we can ensure Sharia compliance by using some specific mechanism in Islamic social finance. And thirdly, as Mr. Dima highlighted, impact reporting is quite important, and it is also relevant to trust. So everything comes to trust before technology in implementing Islamic social finance by using fintech. Second takeaway, somehow we should ensure that Islamic social finance should have a place in national accounts, officially. Islamic banking is almost there, Takaful is almost there, capital market instruments almost there. We have some kind of, ISIC codes and relevant national accounting codes for many of the financial sectors. But for Islamic social finance, we should define it officially, at least in the OIC region, and I think, there should be a working group working on how we can integrate Islamic social finance into our national accounting frameworks in a standardized way. Why I am saying this? Because the future of Islamic social finance is also related to involvement of the governments as well as its internationalization. So different countries should speak the same language. And third takeaway, also related to the internationalization of crowdfunding. Yes, crowdfunding is a very important area, and it could be one of the future fields of Islamic finance in the future. However, standardization and legislative, compliance among different countries is very, very important, because crowdfunding, by its nature, involves internalization of, collecting of the funds. But if we have different legislation for crowdfunding platforms, to be honest, we have this, some kind of similar problems in Turkey. For the last few years, I'm, talking to the capital markets boards on to, change some small, minor legislative items on crowdfunding. So standardization is important, but paradigm changes in finance in many other areas of economy mostly come from international organizations. Imitating other, countries. So local level initiatives are very, very important. I really appreciate this. But I think we also need a kind of centralized mechanism on crowdfunding. Why I am saying this? Maybe, just thinking loudly, Islamic Development Bank could have a kind of common platform, crowdfunding platform. I'm just talking about a platform base on which, individual crowdfunding firms, initiatives can be embedded. But I think we need a common platform which will have its own standardized, rules, common legislation, and so on. In the end of the day, the other countries will try to comply with the rules of this common platform. These are my main three takeaways. I'm putting them to here and just wanted to start, kind of panel discussion among us. The row is yours, please. Let me start with Dr. Ziad. He's shaking his head.
You can summarize all of it.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So, no, we take the points, and Jazakumullah khair to the commentators, Dr. Khalifa and Dr. Fahad. I think that the takeaways as well have summarized very well, what we need to look at. Although I may not agree with the concept of centralization, I think I accept the point that we need to consider crowdfunding independence. But again, Dr. Khalid, one first point is that, of course, the brief given to us in terms of the topic was to focus on the Saudi, crowdfunding platforms, and so we did. But in doing so, the learning for me was that a state-backed initiative could actually be successful. And when we look at crowdfunding platforms internationally, it's very rare to find state-funded or state-supported infrastructure for crowdfunding platforms. So there's a lot to learn if a state intends to do it. And absolutely agreed. Those countries that are financially secure can manage to do that at the state level, and countries that have a strong governance feature and strong public trust can build from the state up down. But for the majority of countries that are in the OIC in particular, it has to be the other way. It has to be an initiative from institutions or organizations or individuals that are trying to tackle specific pain points. And those are another set of case studies. Unfortunately, the paper can't cover everything, but yes, there are very different situations in Sudan as compared to Nigeria. In Sudan, we're facing conflict. In Nigeria, we have a problem, or they have a problem with clean water and hygiene, and cholera is back. So the crowdfunding methodologies have also got to be very, very different. So, and therefore, I disagree with the centralization argument, because, again, what Dr. Khalifa has mentioned, the approach of security of data and the issue of independence is crucial. And in order to achieve that, centralization only works in certain countries. The vast majority will then be influenced by what is the government objective at the time. And so many people will be left alone. And the one that makes noise, the influencer, for example, is the one that benefits from the crowdfunding, whereas the widow at home who is quiet will unfortunately be completely disregarded. So the decentralization would be the main feature in my view, and then the impact reporting should just be a function of the achievements rather than the glossy, shiny nature of impact reports that we see today. Yeah. And that is very important. I'll stop there.
If I may comment with a couple of very quick points. I fully agree with you, Dr. Ziad. I do not support the centralization approach. I think we should be talking more about aggregation rather than centralization. So independent initiatives, but we should be able to take stock of the total, so that we reach a situation where the total is bigger than the individual contributions. And when it comes to independence, I think the case is clear at the international level. At the local level, we do not have an issue of independence, probably. But at the international level, when we depend largely on institutional funding, we leave large segments of people in need unassisted because the decision is very politicized. So that's my point.
Thank you. Rafi Bey?
Just quickly
You
on,
raised your hand. Yani.
yeah, on linking the zakat to SDGs doesn't define the zakat itself. Zakat has its own sets of rules and operations. Today, governments across the world, including Saudi Arabia, GASTAT, the General Authority for Statistics, report the achievements as per the SDGs commitment. These are reporting done by the governments. So we want to make sure there's transparency in the reporting. If SDG 1's achievements were contributed by the non-profit sector, the government should not go and report as their contribution only. So by zakat showing the SDG achievements, the government then has to show, will report 10% of this were coming from zakat or infaq, the balance 90 was government. The responsibility of SDGs is still with the government, but the government should not over-report saying that they did everything. In fact, there's a non-profit sector which have done it. That's why we are linking it to SDGs, so that the transparency is there. The second part on, the presentation that we made, all three, did not just show it as a local level. We showed the amount of zakat, and infaq collected in Saudi Arabia, in Malaysia, but we didn't have time to show where it went. So in Malaysia, for example, we contribute to the Palestinian aid, to the earthquake in Morocco, to the flood in Sumatra. So the zakat and infaq have gone to multiple countries. We didn't have time to showcase that. It was only 10 minutes given to us. So the presentation was not just domestic focus. It was showing the challenges we are facing at the domestic level, but the distribution was quite global. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, my point is already being represented by these two gentlemen. Thank you very much. But I just want to add a little bit of flavor in terms of why playing local first. And I think you rightly mentioned, rather than centralized, is aggregation, because at the end of the day, I think it's also the execution, the bandwidth, and the focus. I think representing founders, conquering the local market is very important before you step out, and there's just so many instances that a founder focusing on a global level, especially when it comes to fintech, which is highly regulated, and they just fell apart just because they're not too focused and they haven't really secured the home turf. So I think that's also from the founder's hat, that's very important.
Thank you. Thank you, brother. Brother Dr. Fahad,
Yes.
Any comment, anything to add?
Just regarding the fintech, التقنية المالية يعني هي في الحقيقة أداة في التمويل الإسلامي، والتحديات التي يواجهها أو استخدام الفنتك تحديدا هي تحديات التشريعات في الدول. قد نجد مثلا بالنسبة للمملكة العربية السعودية فيها توسع بشكل كبير في مسألة البنوك الرقمية وكذلك الفنتك اللي يعني تسهيل التشريعات وكذلك التواصل بين المشرع والمستفيد وبناء هذه القرارات بحيث تكون أكثر مرونة وأكثر توسع. بالنسبة لقطاع البنوك بشكل عام أو مثلا في الجي سي سي تحديدا، فنشوف هناك تطور في استخدام الفنتك لا سيما في بعض الدول التي بدأت متأخرة مثل عمان. نجد أنها أخذت خطوة كبيرة في استخدام الفنتك. أما فيما يتعلق في قضية الاستخدام وعدمه للأفراد، هذا أمر موقوف على الثقافة وعلى التسويق وكذلك الثقة للعملاء. هذه الجوانب الثلاث إذا تمت العناية بها بين أصحاب القرار المشرعين وكذلك المستفيدين، لا شك أنه راح يكون له دور كبير في التوسع لاستخدام الفنتك. كثير من الدول، بل أتوقع أن لا تكاد دولة في المنطقة إلا وجعلت التحول الرقمي ركيزة في رؤية الدول. مثلا على سبيل المثال دولة الكويت برؤيتها 2035 التحول الرقمي هو ركيزة في الرؤية الكويت فيجن 2035. فبالتالي هذا الاستخدام والفنتك الفاينانس تكنولوجي هو جزء لا يتجزأ في هذه الرؤية، كونه يعني يمثل أو الاستخدام أو هذه الفنتك يتعلق بقطاع وهو القطاع الخاص تحديدا. أما فيما يتعلق في القطاع العام الحكومي فلا يتعلق إلا ببعض التعاملات ذات العلاقة بالفنتك.
Thank you, brother.
You're welcome.
So unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. I don't like to say this, but we also have to skip the Q&A session. Unfortunately, I'm receiving warning from my brother. So I'd like to thank to all of our panelists for their insightful contributions. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
عليكم السلام.